Hi HR Nation, welcome back to another episode of the HR Leaders Podcast, the show where we explore the future of work with industry experts and HR executives from the world's leading global brands. On today's show, I'm joined by Elaine Bergin, Director of Colleague Experience at BT. Welcome to the show, Elaine. How are you?
Oh, thank you, Chris. I'm really well. Thank you. How are you?
Not too bad, not too bad. The rain's back again. We had like a week. We had 1 week of being really hot, and then it's just pouring down for a week. But no one's surprised about that, are they?
No, it's very true. It's very true. and how apt to be starting off a conversation by talking about the weather.
That's just like the go-to. Is that the go-to thing around the world, or is that just in England that you talk about the weather?
I think it's just in the UK. I think it's just us Brits, you know.
Yeah. Oh, maybe it's us. All right. If anyone else listening, let us know, because I feel like it's a go-to in the UK, right? It's like, what else should you talk about? Just talk about the weather. See, that's been. But how have you been? Because I know you've joined BT, what, 13, 14 months ago, if I'm right?
Yeah, just over a year. So I joined BT in the second week of the first lockdown. So it wasn't exactly the induction that I was expecting.
I bet.
I still haven't met quite a lot of my colleagues, either work colleagues or people actually in my team in person. So it's been a new way of working to have to embrace alongside everybody else around the world, but quite a challenge joining a new organisation during that time, and especially trying to lead quite a big program of change and activities here at BT, and in an organisation that has had to respond to the pandemic as well. So it's been fun.
It's and especially as you just said, the Director of Colleague Experience of all times to join, and
yes,
I bet your role took on a whole new meaning.
It absolutely did. In fact, within a few months of me joining, I was then asked to take on the role of looking after the COVID response here at BT. So it's been a baptism of fire for sure.
Yeah. Before we go any further, tell everyone a little bit more about your background personally, and like your journey before now and how you got here.
Well, I've always worked in retail, actually. So joining BT is my first step in a completely different sector. If I go right the way back, I can tell you I started off working in retail before I was really old enough to. My grandfather had a shop, and I absolutely loved it in there. And I was in there from the moment that I was big enough to reach the till on the counter and help him out, which was fab for my grandmother, because she used to try and encourage me to go in on Saturdays so she could go off and do something else. So I'm sure that's probably where I got the retail bug from originally. But yes, I worked in a number of different retail organisations. I worked for Clark's Shoes, Safeway back in the day before it was Morrison's.
I forgot about Safeway. We used to shop at a Safeway back in the day. Yeah. Safeway. Yeah, we had one in East London, like in Canning Town. There was a Safeway right there.
Yeah. Oh, yes. And then I went back to Clark's again for a period of time, and then moved on to Gap and then Sainsbury's more recently before joining BT. And almost all of that time in HR. And I've done about half of my careers have been in roles that have been sort of business facing, business partner type roles, and half of my career, what I call the back end of the HR horse, doing roles either in centres of excellence or in shared service operations. Yeah. And a lot of my time in technology transformations.
Amazing.
Which almost everywhere I go, it seems.
I was about to say, yeah, that's just, it's never ending. It's only, and the last 50 months has only made that speed up exponentially.
Yeah. It's been totally clear.
Because the role of a Director of Colleague Experience is kind of emerged over the last few years. So for people that aren't familiar, how do you describe your role to people?
It's a good question, and I think it definitely, the words colleague experience do seem to be becoming more and more popular in the HR, vocabulary. For me, it's about finding the vision and the moments that matter, the points that are important in the end-to-end colleague life cycle, from the point at which they start to think about working in your organisation and the moment that they engage with you, all the way through to the point at which they leave for whatever reason, and everything that happens to them in between, sort of really pulling out by persona type, by the different types of people that work for you, what is it that you want them to experience along that journey, and what are the really, really important moments in each of those sort of sections of somebody's career, if you like. And then it's about putting in place the mechanisms to deliver those, to make them happen. So actually, my full job title is Director of Colleague Experience and Delivery. So not only do we have to kind of create the vision for what we want the colleague experience to be, we've got to actually land it in the hands of colleagues. It doesn't sit on a PowerPoint deck or just be something that we pull out and share with the board once every now and again.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting you mentioned personas, because since the pandemic and moving towards hybrid, that's like everyone's now all of a sudden it's like breaking our employee population into personas.
Yes.
And looking at each persona and then the impact of what that looks like on each part of the organization or the experience itself.
Yeah.
So we hear companies talking about how we're going to go back 1 day a week, 3 days a week, and now it's no longer about, it's about looking at the personas and then creating processes, not even processes, principles. I think most companies now are moving from, we don't need a process in place or, or policy,
Policy.
Yeah. A policy. I think we've learned we can trust people. I think if one thing we've learned over the last 15 months is people aren't going to disappear and stop working and, we can trust people. So now it's really, really refreshing to see companies move to personas and focusing on principles and moving away from a traditional policy and a one size fits all.
Completely. And I've actually never really liked the word consistency in HR, in the HR world. For a long time I've felt uncomfortable about sort of putting consistency into policies or processes or activities, because it does kind of come with it this assumption that everybody is the same and that there is a one size fits all answer. Whereas I think, 30 years in HR, the thing that I know is that everyone is different. And the persona thing is actually quite a nice way of finding personalization, but in a way that's manageable and recognizable. But at the same time, having the ability to be more principle led. And I mean, in BT in particular, we've adopted that approach in fact very clearly around our return to workplaces plan. So at the point at which we do start heading out of homes, for those who have been working from home all the way through this pandemic and back into particularly office spaces, then the way in which we're approaching that is very principle led. So there's no fixed, you must go back 3 days a week, 4 days a week, 5 days a week, or even 1 day a week. It's very much a sort of, a set of principles by which we will trust people to operate within the teams, to know what's right for them on any given day, and therefore then what is right for the customer.
What do you see the area where you and your team can have the biggest impact moving forward?
I mean, outside of the pandemic, and of course, everyone has been as best as possible trying to focus on what's really the day job, albeit in strange circumstances. Outside of that, my team are on a big mission around the digital agenda. We have 4 key missions across my team. One is to drive a digital experience for our colleagues. So, putting digital first, activities first. The second is around the colleague experience itself and landing it, taking it off the PowerPoint vision that it is today and putting it in the hands of colleagues for them to experience for real. The third is around service and a service orientation and a service delivery that, for me, it starts with the service that you experience as a candidate through to being a colleague, that then enables you to say, well, if that's the way that I'm served here, then that's the way I'll serve customers too. There should be a sort of natural reflection of that. So there's a service orientation mission that my team are on. And then the fourth is data, and being much more data led than we have been before. And that data leadership spans actually the other 3 of those 4 key missions as well. So there's a digital element, a service element, and a colleague experience element to our data story too. And we're going through a big program of change with our technology, ripping out the legacy technologies that we've got across the HR landscape and replacing them with a single master source of colleague data and a set of kind of peripheral services that fall off that core HR technology to enable a better colleague experience, better service, greater ability to be data-led, and a digital colleague experience that people can recognise at work that's more aligned to the kind of digital experience they get outside of work.
Mm-hmm.
So we've got a big programme of work going on around that at the moment. It's something we call iConnect. And the iConnect programme, I mean, it links in very nicely to our overall purpose at BT, which we talk about being We Connect for Good. So that's a big program right now. So taking up a lot of time.
Just a little bit of work involved.
Yeah, it is. It is. And when you've got we've 110,000 employees around the world.
Is that how many it is now? Wow.
Yeah,
wow.
Yeah. So there's a lot of work to do to make sure that not only do we transition smoothly, but that we treat our colleagues' data with with the right degree of governance and intent, and that we ready people as well for what's going to be a big change in the way HR gets done.
It's interesting you mentioned your sort of technology stack, because we realized, didn't we, in this new way we're trying to move forward, it's just not designed for that. It's almost designed to be a one size fits all. The technology itself has been designed that way around policies. So trying to recreate and reflect these personas and the ways of working, the principles from a data perspective, is almost like starting from scratch in a way. Would you agree?
It can be. I've been involved in a number of technology implementations. I mean, a lot of people call them transformation. I try not to use the word transformation as much as possible, because I think it sort of sets this expectation of some piece of magic that goes on.
Or like an end date as well, right? It's kind of like
and it never finishes.
There's no end date.
It never finishes.
Yeah.
So you're quite right, but I've been involved in a few of these across my career, and I mean, and the technology itself actually has moved on enormously. Particularly, I'm going to say, in the last sort of 5-6 years, as specifically the big suppliers in this space have moved into the cloud and a much more software as a service based. But I do think it's a common issue. I think that, as I've gone through these experiences in previous organisations and now leading this here with the iConnect programme here at BT, I talk to a lot of other organisations, and I think that there are many people who are facing the challenge of legacy, outdated technology that puts them in a position where they're really very stuck with the way in which things work or the processes that they've got to follow. It's a difficult thing to move into, because it's hard for HR to raise the business case in the first place. It's very difficult to compete with accessing the kind of funding that's needed to make these sorts of changes when there are competing priorities in an organisation that perhaps will turn a revenue corner, and that's more difficult to do in the HR space. And then it's actually difficult to execute, and takes a great deal of effort and dedication and experience and bravery, quite honestly.
You're not exaggerating when you say bravery, are you, though? That's the thing.
No,
you're not. You're really not. And
I'm not. I have got grey hair underneath.
I've heard so many of those stories, as you can imagine, on the show, of like, when I was like, what was one of the biggest challenges you've ever had to do that career? This transformation. I know you don't like the word, but transformation as well. People, and then you think you're going one direction and you're pivoting constantly. It never. I don't even know why people even bother setting deadlines, because there's no end date to these things. They continue to evolve. But to your point about sign off, and so they should, exactly. That's the thing. Like, there's no end date. There shouldn't be an end date to it. It's not like, oh, by this date everyone's going to be on, onboarding and everyone's excited and we've had this whole cultural shift. It's not going to happen that quick. But we are seeing now, though, if there's ever been a time to get sign off, and to make a business case. Now's the time. I haven't heard many HR leaders say, I can't get budget during the last 15 months because companies have been turning to HR and being like, what do we do? And they're realizing that, work isn't a place that we go to for the first time. And they're like, oh, wow. And then how do we, connect with people when they're not sitting next to me in an office? What does that look like now?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So it's made everyone rethink.
I remember one of the first questions pointed at me by, one of my former colleagues at Sainsbury's who led the business continuity team. When we realised the extent of what this pandemic was going to do, one of the first things that they did was turn to me and say, if we're all working from home, can we still pay people? And I think he was genuinely thinking of the technology. Can we use technology outside of the office that enables us to still pay people? And I think it's been amazing just how HR have had to respond to those sorts of things and be ready and just make it work.
You don't realize that as well, right? When everyone's like, we could work from anywhere in the world, we're like, whoa. We can't work from people like, you can't just go and work in the Caribbean now. It doesn't work that way. People understand the implications from a payroll perspective.
No, the tax man doesn't like it. Yeah.
It doesn't work that way, everyone. So you just back up a little bit. Can you share like the technology that you've kind of gone with? Are you able to share that with everyone? Because I think a lot of people are like, that'd be great to hear.
What are you doing?
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. So, I mean, let's be honest, here at BT, like many organisations, this is really not an uncommon story. Our current landscape, our current sort of tech environment for HR consists of an absolute plethora of different tools, right? Some of them are really old, and legacy. Some of them have been built for us and homemade. Some of them have been bought. Some of them are actually not too bad, but and very few of them talk to each other. So there are lots and lots of challenges with our current environment. We'll be moving to SAP SuccessFactors. So we'll be moving across into SAP SuccessFactors, starting with our core HR. So in SAP they call that Employee Central, but really the organisation hierarchy and the people records themselves, through to onboarding, recruiting, learning, and the management of compensation, performance, talent, reporting and analytics, etc. So a really big program of change, actually. We'll continue with some peripheral supporting technologies around the edges of SAP SuccessFactors sitting in the centre, but that will be the beating heart of our HR landscape for us here at BT. And we will also, and I sort of slightly wince at this one because it's and for anyone who's listening who's either done this before or who is steeling themselves to have to face into this one at some point as well, and therefore knows what this takes, we'll also be replacing our payroll system as well. Ooh. I know. So there's a lot of work to do.
Wow.
A lot of work to do here.
Why, I know it's quite a hard question to ask, but why SAP? Like, there's so many companies out there.
Oh my goodness.
Like, was there one particular couple of things you could point out that were like, this is why we chose them? Because it's so hard now. They all claim to do the same thing, and it's just like, it's a bit of a minefield.
Really, it's a really, really, really important question, actually, for any organisation, I think, to think about when they go through this sort of process is, well, what's the right solution for us? And I've used them all and implemented them all. I have no particular allegiance on a personal level to any one one of the big players, let's call it, that are out there at the moment. And I think they all have advantages and sort of win points of difference around each other. I think it genuinely has to be about what's right for your organisation. There are questions to ask yourself, and certainly we did in BT when making the decision about, what's the right architectural fit for how your HR systems will fit into the broader landscape of technology that you've already got perhaps, or that you are strategically moving towards as an organisation. So how does it architecturally fit? What's the functionality like? So what is it that you specifically need your product to do? And what's the closest functional fit for purpose that you think you're going to get? There are slight differences in the way that they work. How successful do you think you're going to be at implementing that particular piece of technology? What are the sort of barriers or challenges that you might need to think about that you'll have to overcome that might be different from one piece of technology to another when you're making the selection choice? How much it costs, comes in to play, of course, and what can you afford? And then last but definitely not least for me, when thinking about the choice of technology you choose to implement, is the relationship that you believe that you can build with your supplier. And genuinely, I think in the world of software as a service, in particular in the sort of cloud-based SaaS world of HR technology, your choice of supplier is going to be closer to you than your own internal technology or IT department. In some ways, you're dependent upon them for the features and the functionality of the product. It's like Microsoft. You get what it comes with. You can't turn it into something it isn't. Not anymore. You can't customize these products. So you've got to be able to put a great deal of trust and build a two-way relationship with them as a supplier. It's not something that you buy, stick the disc in, and they walk off. You're licensing the product with them, and it's much more a partnership than I think it ever used to be in the past. So the relationship's really important too. So those would be my 5 top tips for any organisation to work their way through in choosing tech.
I'm glad I asked that question now. That was great advice, Elaine. Because that's something I always hear from, like off air and off camera. I speak to so many of your colleagues, so much frustration. I was promised this and this happened, and we thought this was going to take the implementation nightmares and so much that we hear about it. But that's really good questions to be asking yourself going in, probably to avoid a lot of that.
Yeah.
And let's not be honest, you are.
It's hard. A lot of money. Yeah, it's a lot of money. It's very stressful. Although honestly, Chris, and I don't want this to sound like I'm being big-headed, because it's in no small part at all been all about the people that I work with. But I've never done this without doing it on time and on budget. It's not impossible.
So you have done it on time. Is that what, sorry? You say you've always done it. Wow.
I've never not been on time and on budget in delivering.
Well, you're one of a few people that I've ever heard say that. It's sad to say that.
Yeah, I know, and I think that there is. There seems to be.
What are the mistakes you commonly see people make then? You've talking about some of the great advice, but are there any, if you could name 3 kind of common mistakes that you see people make, what would they be?
So I think number 1, not being absolutely clear about what it is that you're trying to achieve. So I think being really, really crystal clear on what's the purpose, the vision and the purpose of what it is that you're trying to do and why you're trying to do it. So much so that, and in a simple way that enables you to articulate that to your HR colleagues, but also your business colleagues, the end users of your technology. You need to be able to repeatedly talk about what we're doing and why we're doing it. And if you can't be clear on that, then you'll trip over and struggle with some of the decisions that you've got to make along the way. So having those sorts of, the principles of your vision in the first place that you can keep looking back at and saying, I need to make a decision. What am I meant to be? What's the purpose?
It's like guiding, right? That's what keeps you on track. You can just, if this is in line with our principles, great. If not, we shouldn't be doing it.
Yeah.
The second thing for me, I think, is about being organised and being structured in the way in which you set yourself up for a successful implementation. I mean, choosing the right technology first off against what it is that you're trying to achieve, choosing the right partners and resources to be able to work with you, but then setting them up in such a way that that you're going to be successful. And I have a little methodology
with software as a service, it works particularly well, where I talk about and drive real accountability within an implementation team by talking about there's 4 different channels, if you like, to the way in which we're going to get this done. Number one, we're going to take that product and we're going to make it functionally fit for purpose. And I talk about that. In BT, I call that turn it purple, right? So, and at Sainsbury's, I talked about that as being, let's turn it orange. But it's functionally fit for purpose. And I need to be able to look at the group of people who make the decisions about whether that technology is functionally fit for purpose or not. I need to look them in the eye and know that that is what they're focused on. And your job is there to make the decisions about how that product works here and here in BT, what's right for us. And whether that be things like what's on a drop-down list, what does a letter contain? Do we use that piece of functionality? Do we not? Who gets access? Who doesn't? Those sorts of questions, there's a channel of people for that. That is their job. The next channel, I say, well, now we've got to plug it in. So we've bought the product, we're going to make it functionally fit for purpose. Now we plug it in, and I need to look directly at this group of people over here and say, your job is to make that product fit in with our broader architectural landscape. That means you're responsible for security, you're responsible for integrations, you're responsible for testing, and making sure that people have access to it and that it works. So that's the next channel. And the first one primarily sits in HR. The second one primarily sits in your technology teams. The third channel is then we've got to fill it with data. And so, of course, I need to, again, look someone clearly and squarely in the eye and say, right, you're responsible for data migration, identifying where's the originating source of that data, how are we going to make sure that we get it in to the new product and reconcile that it's all there and it's appeared at the other end in the right way. And then the last but not least is getting people to use it. And this is our change management work stream, and really about making sure that we identify, who's this going to touch? If it's everyone, what does that mean? What's going to be different about it compared to what they experience today? Is that difference a big deal? Not such a big deal? Do we communicate? Do we have to train? Do we do nothing? Do we just land it on them and say, have a go? What's the approach for helping people manage that change? And so those 4 elements, that's kind of like my HR systems implementation guide for dummies, to make it functionally fit for purpose, plug it in, fill it with data,
that's the title
and make
now.
people use it.
That's the title.
And then you need an umbrella over the top of that, which is your program management, and their job is bring it home on time and on budget.
I feel like I'm going to put a
which
link.
Really just means have a plan.
Yeah, I feel like I'm going to do a clip now on LinkedIn, HR Tech and Innovation for Dummies. To be honest, it makes sense now why you've done it on time and on budget, because that seems to be a lot more well organized than some of the other versions that I've heard over the years. But I'm sure that's from experience, though, right? That's from many years of experience.
Yes, it's from doing it before, and learning from many people along the way. And one of the best things about this is just it's working with some fab folks who bring their experience to the table as well. And actually, even one of the brilliant things that I've always enjoyed about these sorts of big change programs as well is just seeing people shine. Folks who I don't know. I can think of people who their job was to. I think about people when I've worked with recruitment systems. I can think of somebody. I've got somebody in mind actually, whose job it was originally to sit there with their headset on, answering the phone, keying in recruitment information into a system, and there was just something about them that they got it. They got how it works. So we pulled them out, put them on the program. They sat in that make it functionally fit for purpose team, and by the end of it, they were running it. I mean, they were,
because they're the people that are on the ground level every single day. They know level,
got something. You see it, and you see them come out of it, and 2 years down the line, they've tripled their salary. They're hot in demand.
That's amazing.
It's just awesome to see that sort of thing happen.
That's what it's all about, isn't it? That's what it's all about. Talent. Like when I look at my most enjoyable experiences as a leader, it's seeing people flourish like that, like what you just described.
Yeah,
there's no better feeling to see that person succeed and be so happy for them.
and that's a sideline of what you're doing, but on a really big level, what I've experienced with technological change is, when you digitize the HR function, and I think HR people have really got to get their act together and get themselves better at thinking that that's their job. It doesn't belong to your IT department. It's your job. But when you digitize the HR function, you change how HR gets done. The big winners are a talent, performance, and engagement, because what's left in HR is that. It's no longer foundational transactional activity. It's no longer running and checking reports. It's no longer having to remind managers of what it is that they've got to do or doing it for them. When that's systemized and digitized, the big winners are talent, performance, and engagement. And I think that's really exciting.
Mm-hmm. Before I let you go, then I'm going to quickly jump into our quick fire round, which I do with every guest as well. So I'm going to ask you. No, it's fine. Don't worry. It's why I never tell anyone, because then I know it's authentic. For everyone listening, see, Elaine didn't know. I told you, not planned. So I'll ask you 5 questions, and you have no longer than 30 seconds to give us some amazing answers. Are you ready? No, you're not ready. What was the number one thing that was holding you back from becoming a leader in your field, a leader in the HR space, let's say?
Honestly, nothing.
What do you commonly see that holds people back then that you conquered? Because you must have recognized what it took to not let it hold you back, and kind of went head on, whereas others perhaps may have.
I can think back to sort of moments in my own life, right the way back to childhood, actually, where, when you just learn something and you think, oh my goodness, that's a life lesson right there. And I can think of a couple of things in particular that I remember. I mean, I said at the beginning, I worked in my grandfather's shop, and he was a stickler. And I remember one of the things that I learned, and I won't tell the full story about how it came about, but he said to me one day, Elaine, if you're going to do a job at all, you might as well do it properly. And that's kind of stuck with me. And then I also remember going through a really kind of, I was pretty shy actually as a, young girl, early teens, and quite sort of, apprehensive, mostly because I was worried about getting things wrong, actually. And then I remember, again, I won't tell the full story, but I can place myself there. Being in a situation where I was really nervous, I was going to be on stage doing something, really, really nervous, and then looking around me and thinking, well, these other people are going to do it. Well, if they can do it, I can do it. And just having that sort of realization that I'm just no different to anybody else. So why not? And I think it's moments like that sort of, you have to hold on to give you confidence.
Thank you for sharing those stories. What's the best piece of business advice you've ever received?
Oh my gosh. These really are putting you on the spot, aren't they?
Or advice you give other people,
So I do think it's about listening. If I'm honest, I can actually think of the moment that I sort of realized this, and it was learning from somebody else, just watching someone who I thought was successful, who I looked up to, and how they went about, getting their business done. And one of the things that I remember specifically noticing about them was that they listened, genuine curiosity, about what is the challenge, what's the objective, what stands in the way, discovering, curious, and listening.
One of the hard things is the industry and and the function has evolved so much, and it continues to evolve at such a rapid pace. How do you keep up to date with current events and trends? Kind of what are your sort of go-to resources, websites, etc., or is it your network? What for everyone listening, perhaps new in their journey early, how do you keep up with everything?
Well, there's me quoting a book at you. You're probably going to say, you're probably going to expect me to say that I do a lot of reading. I mean, I do like to read, but But I think actually it's a whole basket of different things that I've, I guess, accumulated over time as mechanisms to stay up to date. You know, recommendations for things to watch or listen to from other people. I mean, technology is great, isn't it? You know, discovering things like your podcasts, for example, through LinkedIn. You know, what you pick up from networking events. You know, and of course they've been online, but they've still been going ahead over the last year or so. What you hear from listening to other people, what you pick up from just being naturally curious and asking questions. I think it's a bit like the conversation we had earlier. For me, there's no one size fits all. It does take a bit of dedication. And I think actually one of the things that I did, I remember this from my time at Gap. It was a bit of a mantra there from the original founder of the organisation. Had a saying, had a number of sayings. I mean, I never had the pleasure of meeting him, sadly, but you know, he always sounded like this just an amazing person. But one of his sayings was, "Love what you do, and do what you love." And that's really, really stuck with me. And I think if you love what you do, if you really genuinely enjoy it, then keeping up to date, as it were, isn't the chore that it sounds like.
100%. How would your friends and family describe what you do for a living?
Depends who you ask.
I love asking this question because I always
It really does depend who you ask. I mean, I think my mum would just say she works for BT.
That's it. That's
about as far as it goes.
Yeah.
I've got two daughters, and they're both teenagers. They know, young teenagers, and they know that I work in HR. My one daughter's absolutely convinced that all I do is just talk to people all day, you know, and I think that's,
she's not wrong in some ways.
No, I suppose not. And I you know, I think particularly the last year or so when they've been at school at home, and I've been at work at home, so we've been together in the same environment, and they can just kind of constantly hear either me talking or people on Teams talking. You know, it's just this, you know, we roll from one meeting to the next, don't we, all day. And so I think that's what she would say. She just talks for a job. I've got a few friends who depend on me for, now I've got this problem at work.
Oh, I bet.
Got this friend who's, so you get some of that sometimes, don't you? And so I think that they think that I'm a problem solver of some description.
And then last question, a very last one. This is the easy one. What's one thing about your role in a business moving forward that you're most excited about?
I think I might have already answered this one earlier, so I'm really sorry to be dull and repeat myself. But I think it is that outcome of what we're doing with the sort of the four missions of digital, colleague experience, service, and data led, and the outcome of that being to put our HR organisation in a position where the primary purpose is all about talent, performance, and engagement. You know, to move the needle away from transaction and support into true talent, performance, and engagement activities. I think it's dead exciting, especially in a large organisation, especially in an organisation that's on a big strategic journey right now.
Yeah, what a great reason to get up in the morning. And it honestly, I know we've only met each other a few weeks ago, but it sounds like they're really lucky to have you, to be honest.
Oh, thanks.
As well. So I'm sure you're going to get. No, I'm being Jay. I'm not just saying that as well. So it sounds like they got the right person. And what a great time though to be working in this. I know it's a hard. Let's not pretend it's not been one of the most difficult times, personally, professionally, for many people all over the world as well. But on the flip side of that, it is also very exciting at the work that we're seeing happen and the shift that we've been seeing taking place that people have been pushing for forever. And now we're doing it. So exciting times ahead.
It's a great time for the profession, but you're absolutely right. It's certainly not lost on me the humility that's been needed. from the people who've had a really difficult time.
Yeah. Well, we're here to make sure we can improve that as well moving forward. But look, thanks for joining us on the show. It means a lot. I really enjoyed it. Hope you had fun. Hopefully the quick fire round wasn't too hard. So we've got to do a part 2 now, because I really enjoyed speaking to you. Apart from that, enjoy the rest of your day, and I'll see you again soon.
You too. Take care. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.